Hello, how are you? Thank you for taking out the time. This video is on the Nakshatra of Rohini. Rohini falls entirely in the sign of Taurus, and as per mythology it's ruled by Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma, as per mythology, is the creator of the creation. So he created the plants, the animals, the mountains, the water streams, the stars, and he made sure our earth is ecologically balanced. He is the ruler of Rohini, so naturally a Rohini native would be very creative, and the creative ability would be in abundance. That's the first thing. Let's talk about the constellation, the Nakshatra of Rohini. As per mythology, Rohini is considered to be the most beautiful nakshatra. So much so that Lord Brahma, who created Rohini, just like everything else, was spellbound by Rohini. Such was Rohini's beauty. So everything that we see in this world, which is very valuable, very beautiful, is Rohini related. In another story, Chandra, who's known to be the divine form of moon, is married to all the 27 nakshatras, and he would spend one entire day with every nakshatra. If you trace out moon's journey in the sky, it covers one nakshatra 13 degrees 20 minutes every day. So that mythology can also be proven by moon's journey in the sky. The mythology is when Moon, who's married to Rohini, when he spent the time with Rohini, he could not stay away from Rohini. Such was the beauty of this section of the sky. So all luxury brands are directly linked to Rohini. Big cities in the world have streets dedicated to luxury brands. I remember when I had the opportunity to visit Paris, there was a street called Champs-Élysées. I'm very sure I've mispronounced it. But it was known for all kind of luxury brands. That is exactly what Rohini is about. Similarly, we look at those movies which show big houses, which are very well decorated. There's an expensive chandelier, expensive paintings, a very well made elaborate dinner table. Everything which is very valuable is Rohini linked. Now intuitively you'll understand why this nakshatra is also directly linked to the beauty sector. The first brand comes to mind is Nike, a very popular beauty brand based out of India. And if I remember correctly, someone did contact me on Far Far Away who was working for Nike, and I found Rohini's influence in that person's chart. So beauty brands, perfume brands, fashion brands, and all related industries are linked to Rohini. Now nothing expensive can be bought without large sums of money, and therefore Rohini is directly linked, in my view, to the finance sector. So if you have the ruler of the 6th, 10th or the 11th house in Rohini, you could have a career in finance. You could be a wealth manager looking after wealthy clients, or you perhaps are analyzing financial data on investments made which are very valuable. Rohini is all about doing things in a grand way, and therefore in the finance sector too, I think your work is likely to be on a large scale. Before I go any further, Marilyn Monroe has Sun in her chart in Rohini. Sun would always remain a natural signifactor of our public image. So a person having Sun in Rohini is likely to be very attractive. In her case, I found that her rising nakshatra is Ashlesha, which also symbolizes beauty and glamour. And her fame is also due to Moon's position in her chart, which is in the 7th house in Dhanishta. All of this together made Marilyn Monroe who she was. I'm focusing on the beauty side, the glamour side of her career, and that is due to Sun's position in Rohini. Earlier I had talked about Lord Brahma being the creator of the creation. The creation has a process, and that is conveyed by this symbol of an ox cart run by 2 oxen. The cart is preparing the ground for new crops. The farming sector entirely belongs to the nakshatra of Rohini, and so are other related industries, like the ones who are picking fruits in a farm, the ones who are sorting fruits and vegetables in an industrial unit, the ones who are transporting food to different parts of the country, different parts of the world. I'm sharing the example of Norman Borlaug. It's likely you may not have heard of him, but he was known to be the father of the Green Revolution. In his chart, I found Saturn in Rohini. Now, Saturn has a lot to do with improving standards, and that is what he did. He improved standards of farming. He later on won the Nobel Peace Prize as well. The point I'm trying to make is, if you have Rohini's influence on career-related houses in your chart, farming can be your future. And in the modern world, we hear stories of startups talking about farm to folk. They are building the entire supply chain. That is also a very Rohini-related initiative. Now, you'd find this interesting that this nakshatra belongs to the caste of a Shudra, which translates to public service. If you look at the farming sector, the farmers are essentially working on the farm to make sure the food supply is maintained. They are serving the society in some ways, aren't they? That is my reason why this nakshatra has been classified by ancient astrologers as belonging to the caste of a Shudra. And if we go back to the farm and we try to imagine, the farmer is protecting the crops by spraying pesticides. The idea is to protect, nurture and nourish the crops. The farmer is responsible for making sure adequate supply of water goes to the crops. The entire farming process has a very maternal side to it. And therefore, I believe this nakshatra is ruled by Moon. Moon is the planetary ruler of Rohini. This nakshatra belongs to the nature of Dhruva. I think this has to do with the sign of Taurus, where Rohini falls. Taurus is known for stability and having a fixated approach, which would be seen in the Rohini natives' way of doing things. Once you've decided on a path, the person continues on that path. This nakshatra is a lot about creativity, but the creation process has a goal. The end objective is to serve the society, to nourish the society. When we have a glass of orange juice, we feel very nourished. The entire service, the entire work behind getting that orange juice into our glass requires a lot of work. All of that work is Rohini linked. And that requires a dedicated approach. There are cycles in weather that the farmer has to look after. So you need to remain dedicated to your job. And that is why this nakshatra has this classification. This nakshatra belongs to the guna of Rajasic, The native is very likely to aspire to own luxury items. The native would also aim to make a name for oneself. Everything human beings aspire towards would be seen in Rohini native's way of life. So Rohini is a lot about achieving things in the world. The creation in the farming sector is also linked to procreation. Rohini is directly linked to all professions linked to childbirth. The 5th house is linked to childbirth. So if you are going through the dasha of the planet placed in Rohini, or the dasha of the planet ruling the 5th house, there's every chance that you could be a father or a mother. I wanted to draw your attention to the creation process is not only linked to the farming sector. Any creation process, childbirth included, is linked to Rohini. So if you have Rohini as your rising nakshatra, you're very likely to be attractive. Your personality would be of a person who's naturally very creative. Now you must understand that this analysis would be incomplete if we don't take into account Moon and Venus's position. Moon is the nakshatra ruler, Venus is the sign ruler. In addition to this, you must also take into account the ruler of the 1st house in the D9 chart, which is going to be the Padha. Rohini rising native is going to have. Rohini would fall in these 4 Padhas: Aries, Taurus, Gemini or Cancer. So if the sign in the 1st house in the D9 chart is Aries, then Mars's position should also be read in your chart in the Navamsha and the main chart. So here, along with beauty and creativity, the person is also going to show Mars-like qualities. If the sign in the Navamsha, in the 1st house, is Taurus, the person is going to be very, very attractive. If the sign in the 1st house in the Navamsha is that of Gemini, the person is likely to be a very charming communicator. If the sign is Cancer, the person would have a very strong maternal side, the nurturing side that's linked directly to Rohini. We had spoken about the farming sector, so that image comes to mind. Moon now would play a very important role in understanding what Rohini rising means for you. Similarly, you must take into account the nakshatra ruler and the sign ruler's position and the position of the planet in the Navamsha to completely understand a planet Rohini position. But studying planet Rohini in isolation is an excellent starting point, so let's start there. Moon in Rohini is a sign of an artistic person. The person would be very attractive. I think Moon's position has a lot to do with our personality and even our physical appearance, in my view. The person would naturally be very maternal, very nurturing. The person would be fond of luxury items, and the approach to life would be very fixated, very stubborn in some cases. The desire for fame is going to be very strong. The person needs to be careful to not give in to desire for fame and money. That's the downside of having Moon's position in Rohini, that the person can become excessively materialistic. There's nothing wrong in living a life full of luxury and comfort, but here the person can become fixed on the idea that I should have a luxurious life. The person cannot board a flight without taking the business class. Moon is known to be the lord of herbs, and Moon Rohini like person is very likely to have an association with the farming sector. If not that, the person might be very fond of gardening, for example. And lastly, Moon is classified as royalty But this nakshatra belongs to the caste of Shudra, public service. The lowest, if you have a hierarchy, Shudra is the lowest. So when royalty goes and performs a service, it is seen as the queen walking on the street distributing goods, for example. That is the kind of role the native might play in the society. So if the person is in the farming sector, the person might farm exotic fruits and vegetables only. When Sun is in Rohini, the person is likely to have a career in finance, in agriculture, or design. Sun would always remain a natural signifactor of our career. I have always seen in my readings that the Sun's position is always a strong indicator of the person's career direction. The person would be very creative, but is also likely to have an ego about one's creative ability. Like we look at artists and they talk about their creations with such pride, we feel, you know what, we like your creations but not you as a person. A Sun Rohini like person can project such image. The person is likely to be attractive, particularly in one's profession. The person is likely to attract fame. I had earlier given you the example of Marilyn Monroe, who had Sun in Rohini. I think Rohini's Dhruva nature, fixed nature, is best expressed by Sun. Sun is a lot about consistency, and when Sun is in Rohini, the person would not go back on one's word, would not stop doing something one started, would take great pride in accomplishing the task assigned to the native. The person, however, is likely to give in to desire for name and fame. Sun symbolizes government work, and this nakshatra is about public service, so the person is likely to be a government worker, particularly in the field of finance. I think finance and government work, there's something common, like a tax officer. Sun is known to eradicate diseases, and Rohini is a lot about nurturing and nourishment. So the person's career indirectly could be linked to the healthcare sector. Like we hear stories that this person has medicines derived from a certain plant, which is very therapeutic in nature. So a Sun Rohini like native is likely to have such medical practice, in my view. When Venus is in Rohini, the person is going to have an abundance of creative ability. The person would be very fond of luxury items. The person may attract a life partner who's very attractive. The person himself or herself would be very attractive as well. The person's life could be a lot about art and beauty and design and accumulation of wealth. Accumulation is very strongly linked to this nakshatra, as this nakshatra belongs to the nature of Dhruva. So laying down the roots, investing in long-term assets, and related professions are linked to Venus and Rohini. Venus is linked to pleasure, and this nakshatra belongs to the guna of Rajasic. So the person can be a pleasure seeker and may not feel fulfilled very easily. And that is the downside of having Venus in Rohini, that the person becomes too accustomed to luxury and comfort. The maternal side of Rohini is about nourishing people, and Venus signifies love and affection. So the person's style of loving people around oneself can also be very grand. The person is known to come up with a grand gesture for one's guests, for example, or lay down a lavish meal for one's guests. That is Venus Rohini's way of nourishing people and serving people. Now, the creation process that's linked to Rohini is also directly linked to birth of a child. Venus Rohini can also lead to a career which is linked to childbirth in some ways. Venus is linked to childbirth, and so is this nakshatra. When Mars is in Rohini, the person combines technical skills and building ability with unparalleled creative skills. So we get to hear stories that so-and-so castle was built by so-and-so person. That's a very Mars Rohini-like thing to have happened. Or we hear of stories of this luxury item has been designed by so-and-so person. So you combine design with technical skills. You combine creativity with engineering. That's Mars in Rohini for you. The person can also have a career which is on the technical side of the finance sector. The person's farming style could be very enterprising. The person could be an entrepreneur, an innovator in the farming sector. So since this nakshatra belongs to the caste of Shudra and the native Dhruva, and Mars follows the directions, the person can be in government service. The person is likely to not waver from one's path. Mars can be too hard on oneself, and this nakshatra is Dhruva, fixed. So if the person has decided on a goal, the person would be going after the goal with everything the person has. The person sees that as a war, as a challenge, which can be counterproductive in some cases, that the person is not very flexible. Inflexibility would be seen in the natives' way of doing things, and that I'll also associate if Moon is there in Rohini. Mars is a pleasure seeker, and so is this nakshatra, and Mars perhaps does not know the boundaries. So the person is very likely to give in to desire. The person keeps running after things of the world and sees no end in doing that. When Mercury is there in Rohini, the person makes the best arguments, the most creatively put together comments. That's Mercury in Rohini for you. It reminds me of a television series that I started watching called The Rampall of the Bailey, the barrister who would frame arguments in the courtroom. The arguments were funny, but at the same time very artistically put. That is Mercury Rohini for you. I can also see an advertiser having Mercury in Rohini, a YouTuber, a blogger. The person can also have a background in finance. Mercury is our intellect. So the person has the mental capacity to understand the value of things, and therefore career in finance, and within finance, financial advisory. The person's views are likely to be less flexible. If the person has concluded in some ways, the person would be very inflexible of changing that view. Mercury is known for flexibility, however this nakshatra is fixed. So it's either going to be the case that the person finds oneself in a fix. The person wants to change something, but the environment is such the person is unable to do so. Like an advertiser, the team has decided that this is the creative direction we are going to follow. A Mercury Rohini person feels, no, we should explore more, but the environment is such the decision has been made, so the person feels a bit stuck. As the two opposites are coming together in Mercury and Rohini, Mercury's flexibility is now met with Rohini's stability. The person is going to be someone very social. The person can be in the business, linked to the farming sector in some ways, or design related, money related. The person is likely to desire to have contacts in the society. Like people say that I'm excellent at networking, or I have built my business on account of the network I had built. Rohini is all about achieving things in the world, and Mercury is excellent at connecting with people. When Jupiter is in Rohini, I see an art director. Creations now are driven by a philosophy. We are building this to convey a message. Like we see pieces of art telling a story. The art we see in museums, they tell a story. There's a purpose, and that is what a Jupiter Rohini-like native would try to convey through one's creations. The person would have an abundance of creative ability. Jupiter signifies abundance and Rohini signifies creation. The person can be extremely knowledgeable about the farming sector. The person could be an expert in financial affairs. Like we hear stories that he or she is an expert in stock markets, a guru in investment banking. Now, Jupiter is a lot about exploration and travel. And this nakshatra is about laying down the roots. So it's likely that if travel opportunities are going to come your way, they are long term. Like the company is asking you to move to the east coast of US from the west coast, for example, for 3 years. So I see travel opportunities to be more linked to shifting your base for a long time rather than having constant opportunities to travel. I think the materialistic side of Rohini would be well guided by Jupiter. I think the person naturally may attract wealth and fame. When Saturn is in Rohini, the native is likely to work on a creative project for a very long time. Like we hear stories that this sculpture has been built by this person who worked on this for 6 years. That is a prime example of Saturn and Rohini's creative ability. The other day I was watching this documentary on how cheese is produced, cheese of the highest quality, which is used in 5 stars, for example. That cheese is stored in a container and is fermented over a long time. That long duration of the creation of the cheese is what I'm linking to Saturn and Rohini's creative ability. Within the finance sector, the person can be a very careful investor. I've seen people having Saturn and Rohini having a career in risk management. Saturn is about consistency and doing one thing for a very long time, and this nakshatra is also about the same. I think a Saturn Rohini-like person is going to be very dependable, very loyal, very committed to traditional values and ancient methods in particular. The desire for fame is going to be very controlled. Saturn does well in the nakshatra of Rohini, but Rohini's planetary ruler is Moon, and Saturn and Moon do not share a great relationship. So it might be the case that the mind has the desire for materialistic things of the world, but the person has put oneself under such restrictions that the person is unable to enjoy the pleasures that Rohini has in store for the person. Like we hear stories of a rich person having a beach villa somewhere, but given the nature of the work, the responsibilities of the work, the person is unable to take advantage of that villa. The person is living far off in a city. So that might play out, that Saturn creates restrictions and Rohini is about materialistic pleasures. So that might play out in some ways. When Rahu is in Rohini, the person is likely to have some unique creative ability, and that too in abundance. If the person has a background in finance, it's likely to be linked to future money, like cryptocurrency or dealing in foreign currency. The person is likely to be very driven towards making a name for oneself. This is where this position can be very difficult. I have seen an example of a famous person having Rahu in Rohini, that person decided to follow the wrong path to become famous. So Rahu Rohini-like person can have this strong desire. Rahu is about desire. This is a very materialistic nakshatra. When they come together, the person becomes very fixed on the idea of fame. Immorality, unethical behavior, impulsive behavior is linked to Rahu. So a Rahu Rohini-like person needs proper guidance. So the position of Moon, the position of Venus, and the aspects Rahu is getting from planets like Jupiter would be important to fully understand how Rahu in Rohini is going to play out in your life. If you do have this combination, my suggestion is to remain practical and link yourself to a higher purpose in life. Name and fame is only going to give you happiness for a certain time, and that philosophical understanding of life would be important. When Ketu is in Rohini, unlike Rahu, the native is likely to remain detached from the idea of materialistic pleasures, which is a good sign. The person may have some natural creative ability, like people say, you know what, I just tried it for the first time and I did so well. Even the artist was surprised to see how well have I done that. I see Ketu linked to the past life skills are linked to Ketu, and it's a sign that the person has had an artistic career in the past. The person might find oneself in the farming sector practicing ancient techniques, like something that has been passed on from generations, and the farmer, a Ketu Rohini person, is practicing the same techniques used by the ancestors. The person is likely to understand market trends, the financial market, very well. Ketu is known to have piercing logic. So if you have Ketu in the 10,000 Rohini, it's likely that you could end up building a career as a financial analyst. And I believe when you enter Ketu's chapter, the dasha of Ketu, there is some chance that you might attract sudden fame. Maybe due to your past life work, you get the fame in this life in some ways. So Ketu Rohini is less worrying as compared to Rahu in Rohini. That is my view. Thank you for taking out the time to watch this video till the very end. If you have any questions, please post a comment, and if you'd like to stay in touch, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks again. Bye for now.